Okay, then let's get this thing started a little early, I think. Okay. Hi, I scheduled this for 1 o'clock to 2 o'clock, but since a few people are already waiting, I think let's start this Agile session. And let me fade out the music. So, hello. This time I'm trying to do a video live session about agility. And it's in particular about, I'm a little confused by the delay that I always see on LinkedIn. So pardon me, it confuses me always because there is kind of a 30 to 60 second delay. And that's just confusing. I might have to close the actual window so that I still see your chat, but not be confused by myself looking back at me from the past. So the topic is overcoming resistance to an agile transformation generally. But many of the techniques are true for general resistance to change. I think it's important to not look at resistance to change as something that gets in your way and that's always negative. And that needs to be kind of worked around or resolved. But in my opinion, it's very important to understand where resistance comes from, why people resist change. And there is a lot that we can learn from understanding motivations, habits, psychology in people, and also learn about the past, what they experienced, to kind of understand. Oh, sorry, I have to close that window. To understand why they resist change and maybe the good things in that resistance. There might actually be good things coming from that. And I want to dive into that. So where does resistance to change come from? Especially if it's about something like agility that many of us who know agility, and I grew up with it basically. I started with extreme programming more than 20 years ago. Agility was something that the people on the teams cried out for. They wanted that. This was the rebellion against the management. And nowadays it's kind of like turned on its head. It's like people say, oh, please get lost with that agility thing. It's something that management wants us to do. And that's kind of unintuitive, at least to me, because it's the benefits are mostly they're there for the whole business. But this whole movement started with the teams demanding that, a better way of working. And nowadays, there is so much resistance in management levels as well as in team levels. So it's important to understand where this comes from. And by the way, you can use the chat. There is a chat. It's called comments here, but I think this is a chat. So if you want to ask questions or something, just put it in the chat. And please bear with me because there seems to be a pretty long delay of half a minute or a minute. So if I'm not immediately reacting to that, please be patient and maybe add context to your question so that I know what I was talking about in my time 30 seconds ago. So let's dive into this. I'm talking about resistance to change because I'm just getting another article ready on my newsletter this week that will come out, especially on that topic of resistance and how in an agile transformation we deal with that. And the fundamental thing that underlies everything, and those people who listen to me more often or read my posts know that, it all comes down to the view of the human being for me, to how we view other human beings, what we assume about why they do things. It's always assuming positive intent. Even if someone screws up, if someone makes a mistake, someone's late to a meeting, we assume positive intent. There are many reasons behind that. I don't want to get into the details. Maybe in the next session, we can do that. But this is an important foundation for agility. If we don't have that, then all the agile methods will just not work. They will not yield any results. So when we demand that agile mindset, that assuming positive intent, all these values, courage, openness, making failure culture, vulnerability, when we demand all that, we also need to meet the people that are looking at this agile transformation with the same empathy. We need to assume positive intent in them, even if they resist the agile transformation, especially if they resist it. Because they don't, and that's the view of the human being, they don't resist it because they are lazy, they don't want to change, they are stupid, or they are too old or something. That would be old Tayloristic thinking. That would be an old view of how humans work. That's not agile. So especially as agile coaches and as leaders or scrum masters, we need to assume positive intent. We need to understand that these people resisting change are trying to do the best they can for the company, for the business, for the team. And this is where it all starts. When we assume they have best intentions and they are not malicious, then we can ask, so why is it hard for them to change? Or why do they try to push back on that change? Why do they think it might be harmful? And then we start having the right conversations. And then we get into the territory of the examples, why people push back with best intentions. One such thing that's very common, probably all of you know, is negative experience with agility in the past. Or with, shall I say, agile, like the capital agile, that people call capital agile. With agile methods and things that were called agile. Nowadays, many people you will meet will have had some experience with something that was called agile. It was called Scrum, was called Kanban, was called Product Owner, was called Scrum Master, whatever. They have some experience. That doesn't mean that they have experience with true agility, but that means they got in contact with the terms. And the problem that we often face is that because there are so many people not quite understanding what is important for agility, and so many people focusing on frameworks and methods instead of on values and beliefs and the view of the human being, that leads to many people having experienced something that was called agile, but that actually wasn't agile. That was just, usually that mechanical implementation of a framework without changing the mindset, without changing management, without changing the business processes, without basically just making the delivery part faster, cheaper attempt. And of course that doesn't work. And of course that backfires for people because they are told, hey, agility, or agile, that's something that's good for you. And then they experience it and they notice that there's more pressure, there is less guidance, there's more pressure on them, still unclear goals, still tight deadlines, still management controlling them, trying to controlling them even more. Like transparency becomes not a positive thing, but a negative thing. Like I'm transparent and they can see my performance and everything. So these are the experiences that some people have with Agile. And for that, it's important, first of all, that we empathize with them. That we say, yes, you are right to hate that. you are right that this, what you experienced as Agile, is not beneficial. And everyone would run from it and would try to avoid it like the plague. So I can totally understand why you do that. Show empathy. Show them you're on the same side. You have the same goal. You want to do something good for the people and for the company and for the business. And then kind of make clear, okay, what you experienced had these terms like Scrum Master and retrospective and things like that, but it wasn't Agile. That had nothing to do with Agile. Okay, sometimes it's just a maybe not so great implementation, but oftentimes it had really nothing to do with agility. Like it's a Tayloristic waterfall thing where they just slap on the new roles and the new terms for the meetings are just renamed, and the requirements documents are now all called user stories and forced into this arbitrary format that doesn't really fit. But yeah, that of course is not agility. So show empathy. And then work with them. Understand them, and then show them what the difference is between true agility and between what they experienced. And that usually helps to ease the tension. Because then they they know you appreciate that they want to avoid the situation they had in the past. That was just called Agile. And they need to understand that this wasn't really Agile, even if it was called like that. That's not always the case. Not all Agile implementations are bad. That would be horrible. But it's often the case. And with with agility becoming mainstream, the problem that we face is that more and more people get into the space, which is generally good, but more and more people also only superficially get into that. So they don't really understand what agility is all about, where it's coming from, what makes it work. And they think what makes it work is to kind of, work in sprints. but that's not the thing. Okay, if you just chunk up your planning that you had before in 2-week things, your waterfall thing, you waterfall the Scrum in sprints, you're not gaining anything. You're just annoying everybody, and you're slowing things down, frankly. So we need to make sure that we understand that, and we need to let people know that we understand that. That can ease part of the tension and the resistance. Another thing that also has to do with past experiences. And by the way, past experiences, that's a recurring theme. There is a lot we can learn from psychology and behavioral science, from motivation. Why people behave a certain way today has usually something to do with the past. We don't always need to go as far back as the psychiatrists would, like, tell me about your father or something. But sometimes, you might laugh, but sometimes I have even noticed that it's the father or the mother. It's really sometimes that early on that we learn certain habits that help us back then to cope with things, but that are not beneficial anymore to us today, or even hurting us today. And we cannot get rid of them. That's just in all other parts of life that happens as well. Like if you kind of grow up with bad eating habits or not exercising, not moving a lot, then you kind of adopt that habit. And it's hard to get out of this. Even if you rationally understand that you should eat more healthy, that you should move more, it's so hard to get out of this. This is what Agile coaches are for. Agile coaches, we have to help people to get out of that, to understand their past habits, where they come from, why they adopted them, acknowledge that they were beneficial. A friend of mine, Jens Hilsensauer, he always says you have to thank these things. You have to thank your past habits because they They tried to do something good for you, but now they might hurt you. They might not be beneficial. So you can thank them and let them go. Kind of. This also makes us feel less bad about what we did in the past, that it was all wrong. No, it wasn't. It was just a different context. And we tried to cope with things, and we learned certain habits that might not be beneficial anymore today. So it has, if you have a background in psychology, that helps a lot. And now the second thing, when we talk about the past and people learning from that, there's not only the negative thing that they've seen fake Agile in the past, but there's also the positive thing that they've seen success with non-Agile approaches. And that is very likely because many companies grew up without agility, especially larger corporations. They usually became successful without thinking about agility. Some things they did might have some Agile values in them, but oftentimes they have a very Tayloristic and traditional and waterfall mindset. I've worked with German engineering companies, and they are very particular about the cost and the engineering part and planning in detail and that. So it's what made them successful in the past. It was a different time, a different context, and the times were more forgiving. It was a different kind of work. So things were different back then, but they were successful. And they cannot immediately understand why what made them successful, the behaviors that made them successful in the past, would now not be beneficial anymore. So appreciate that. One part of it is ensuring people in the whole organization that agility does not mean that you press a big red reset button. Or that you, in that article, I'm just looking at it right now, the article on the Agile Compass that will go out this week. I have the from Men in Black, like this device that kind of makes you forget everything that happened. This is not what an Agile transformation is. You don't forget what you did in the past and how you worked in the past. It was not all bad. Agility is more like a continuation, an improvement upon what is already going well and what you already learned. You don't have to unlearn everything. Sometimes we have to reassure people that this will not happen because they think that now they kind of have to forget everything they did and everything in the past was wrong. All they did was wrong now and they have to learn again. This is frightening, and this is also not very appreciative of people and their past work and their past successes. So acknowledge that they had success in the past. And use the methods they used. Like there are, even if it might be in the context of traditional project management, there are techniques, good techniques that we can use. Oh, now the chat is rolling in. This is the first time I'm using a tool that relays the chat to me here on screen. So great! Thank you for the questions. Let me read it. How do we usually, outside of Agile, communicate our intent for someone else to adopt anything? Do you become vegetarian? Yeah, it's a good thought. Start exercising. It's similar techniques. In that case, it's empathy. Again, all over again. And yeah, you added a comment. If becoming Agile is your intent, you have already lost. Resistance to becoming Agile is simply an expression of lack of understanding how becoming Agile will support their good intent. Also a good point. Thank you for that. Because, of course, agility is not a goal in itself. It's a means to an end. We wanna achieve certain things. Some companies want to be more innovative. Some companies want to retain talent, make it more engaging. Someone just produce better products and have more satisfied customers and a larger market share. Some want to do something good for the planet, for the world, for society, while making decent money. So it's important to know what you want. Exactly. And then it's important to understand, is agility the tool that can get you that? In many cases it is, but we have to understand that. And how can it help us? That's an important first step. Yes. So resistance to change is sometimes a misunderstanding just of agility, what it is. How often have I gone to a management board and they told me, hey, make our company agile? And I always chuckle. And then I ask them why. And a common answer that I get is, yeah, we want to deliver faster. We want to make it faster and maybe also save some money, make it a little cheaper, more productive, more efficient. And then I chuckle again and I tell them, okay, I can help you become agile, but it will make you slower and it will make things more expensive. Do you still want to be agile? And then they swallow hard and either kick me out, which is fine, or we get into a discussion of why it makes things slower and more expensive, which, of course, in the long term might not be true. There might actually be effects that make you deliver faster and make things cheaper, but that's not the primary goal. That's just something that might happen along the way. A colleague of mine, Cliff, puts it the way that agility is not your accelerator in the car. Agility is your steering wheel. So it's not about going faster in the way that you accelerate more and that you have more output. But I probably need to tell you that. Because, if you're listening to this, I assume you have some background and understanding of agility already. So you know that. The thing is that we have to make sure that the companies we help to transform to agility also have a good understanding of what that means. And that agility will also have negative effects in some areas. It will probably slow things down. It will probably increase costs. Engineers sometimes cry that you have to revisit things very often. You don't design them once and then they are perfect and you build on top, but you kind of frequently revisit them and rebuild them and have an emerging architecture and things like that, which is sometimes new to them and seems inefficient. And yes, it's inefficient, but it's not supposed to be efficient. I mean, not on that level. It's supposed to be efficient and effective on another level. And thank you for that comment. So that's very important upfront, clarifying that with your client. Do they know what agility is and do they know why they want to get it? And what it can bring them and what not. Yes, and then back to what I talked about with people and their past. So the past successes, honor them and include them. Not everything, not everything was bad in the past. Not everything was wrong. Quite the contrary, a lot was right. And maybe that just needs a small tweak. And it doesn't necessarily need the agile terms. If people, some companies were, or some people especially, were doing things in the past and it was agile, but they just didn't call it that, which is fine. I don't care about the words. Like 15, 20 years ago, when I did agile transformations, we weren't actually calling them that back then. It was different. It was a different world. People didn't care about agility. They didn't want agility. They wanted their problem solved. There was a company, maybe a software company, and they had problems because their feature output was slower and slower and slower over time, and they had problems keeping up with the competition. So they said, help us, unblock our development. And we did, with agile methods and agile values. We just didn't tell them the words. We just fixed the problem. And it was fine for them. And afterwards we told them, oh, by the way, what you are doing, that's called Scrum. That's called what? Yeah, okay, I forgot it already. But hey, it's great that we do it. So it wasn't about the terms and agility. Nowadays, it's often about agility because people think this is kind of, I don't know. I don't know what they think, but it's a magic wand that magically makes things different and better. And that's important also for the resistance, for understanding resistance to change in an agile transformation. People often actually expect that magic wand. They expect agile methods to tell them how to do their work differently. And many agile methods, most of them frankly, don't do that. They don't tell you what to do. Scrum, for example, a very common agile framework, it doesn't tell you how to work. It's just a framework. It's just a few checkpoints. It's like the, I don't know, the speedometer in your car that tells you how fast you go. It doesn't tell you where to drive or how fast to drive, when to brake, when to turn. It doesn't do that. It's just there to help you and inform you a little bit. You can't expect that thing to kind of tell you where to go and when to slow down and when to speed up. But many actually treat frameworks like Scrum or SAFe or others that way. They expect them to tell them how to do their job, but that's not their purpose. It's the opposite. These frameworks try to get out of your way so that you as professionals, or not, your clients, the teams you coach, the companies you coach, they as professionals can bring their professional understanding of how to do things to the table, because it's different from context to context and from profession to profession. But if you expect the framework to tell you, then you will be negatively surprised. And this is the wrong understanding of agility as just implementing frameworks and methods. That then leads to people adopting that stance and just doing that and then rightly complaining that nothing is changing. And that might lead to resistance to change because they notice that it's not changing. And that's true because the change needs to happen on a different level. It's the assuming positive intent, API in people. It's the view of the human people, the human being. And everything that follows from that. That's failure culture, that's psychological safety, that's courage, that's openness, that's respect. All of these things follow from how you view other human beings fundamentally. If you want to dive deeper in that, get on the Agile Compass, my newsletter. It's free. You can get on there for free. Or then also dive deeper into the how people work and the view of that human being, maybe with Daniel Pink's book, Drive. That's a nice book on motivation and what motivates people. And how that view shifts from the scientific management of Frederick Winslow Taylor from 130 years ago, to the modern view that we have been having for the last 70 years. That has a modern understanding of how people function, what motivates them. And that's the important basis and not the techniques. And sometimes people focus too much on the techniques and methods, then they will rightly complain that it doesn't work. A third point where resistance to change might come from. Oh, and by the way, just Peter mentioning your comment. Yeah, leading by example. That's the way. And that's important. That's so important in an agile transformation that you kind of have the buy-in of leaders, of managers, like the hierarchical leaders. We want to have leadership on all levels, of course, but we need to start with the leaders and the leadership structure we have. And so you want to really have buy-in from management so that they understand why they are doing this agility thing and how it works, so that they can model the behavior. They can lead by example. That's, for example, yesterday or 2 days ago, I talked about psychological safety and how to create psychological safety. And a big part of that is leaders going first, leaders showing vulnerability, admitting mistakes publicly, showing that they are human beings, modeling the behavior. And if someone else screws up and it costs you a lot of money and you're angry as a manager, take that person in front of your whole department and then applaud them and say, you tried something, it didn't work, that's not a problem, it's great that you tried it. So that you can kind of show others, inspire others to do the same. I'm just currently reading a book about humor in business. And they have a good point that, especially for admitting mistakes, a little bit of humor can help. So if you mess up as a leader, be self-deprecating. Use some self-deprecating humor. The best leaders in the world do that. Leaders like, people like Warren Buffett, like, people like Richard Branson or something, they use a lot of self-deprecating humor. And it's leading by example. It makes it easier to admit their mistakes, to kind of take the edge out of it, and lead by example. Thanks, Peter, for that comment. So back to the resistance to change. I mentioned the bad experience in the past with fake Agile, or the good experience with traditional methods. And now a third thing is that I've encountered in the over 20 years I've been doing this a few times, which is people having been rejected, or their ideas having been rejected in the past. Let me explain with an example. I was in a company, and there was one person that was violently, really sometimes physically intimidating, not really physically violent, but really loud, verbally, and threatening. It was a man, especially threatening to women. I don't know where that part of his personality came from, but it was hard because he was kind of trying to destroy every Agile effort that we did. Like every event he tried to derail, and he was always negatively talking about it. He was sometimes even screaming and just leaving the room, or, as I said, intimidating people and kind of standing tall in front of a short woman and telling her, "You are stupid." Which he meant to say, "Your ideas are stupid," but he said, "You are stupid." Sometimes in the heat of the moment, it's probably hard to discern. But that was like at a level that people considered like letting him go, because it was unbearable. And for me, as an Agile coach, the challenge was meeting such a person with empathy, assuming positive intent, despite that nasty behavior, still assuming positive intent, which is hard sometimes. I'm just a human being. We all are, okay? Sometimes it's hard, and sometimes you want to just say, that's just a nasty guy, get rid of him. But yeah, nobody said it would be easy. That's why we're paid so well, I guess. So I try to meet that person with empathy. Try to get behind, where is this resistance come from? Where is really a sore spot that we must have hit? Because otherwise people are not behaving like that. Like it was bad for his own career. It was, he knew that, and still he couldn't help it. And what I found out, and it wasn't in just a few days. It took a long time. It took weeks, if not a month. I can't really remember. It's a few years ago. To find out what happened. And once I learned the truth, it all clicked into place. I understood why this person is furious. It didn't excuse that behavior, but it kind of made me understand where it's coming from. And that was when I learned, we as Agile coaches, we were, of course, evangelizing for testing, test automation, test-driven development, because that helps a lot in becoming Agile. If you automate your testing and you use a test-first approach instead of a test-last approach, the traditional QA approach, but you use a test-first approach and you implement automated tests and you really invest into that, which sometimes has some upfront costs depending on how legacy your hardware, software, or services are. And we were trying to push that through, and we are now having some success that people understood, slowly began to understand the value of that, and started setting up CI/CD servers, doing testing, having automated tests, kind of like winding down the test teams and putting the people to better use to kind of design automated tests instead of manually testing. And so we were happy. But that person, that nasty person that was so resisting the change, and I only find that out later, they basically had the same idea before. Like literally half a year or a year before we Agile coaches came for the Agile transformation. They proposed that to their management. They proposed, hey, let's add test automation because it will increase quality, will make us work faster, it will make things better in general. It's just more professional. And he built a whole system already, like a prototype and a starting point. They could have just used it, and it was actually good, pretty great. And they turned it down. They told him, nope, we're not going to do this. This is not a good idea. This is not helping us. And so he built it for, I don't know, just for throwing it away. And then came the Agile external coaches, from his point of view, said the same thing, do test automation. And suddenly, management listened to us. They didn't listen to him when it was his idea. And now that it is our idea, they listen to us. And that, of course, is infuriating. I can totally empathize with that. It doesn't excuse his behavior, his nasty behavior, of course, but it kind of helped us understand where he's coming from. And it also helped us to approach him and understand that and say, hey, we're sorry, there wasn't our intention to steal your idea. And maybe you can lead that effort in something. So you can kind of approach these people differently. And that's the goal with this understanding that often ideas we bring under the terms of agility have been proposed before by employees. And then you have the typical effect that the employee is not listened to, but once you have an external consultant, oh yeah, everything they say is gold. And yeah, but I said it before. Yeah, doesn't matter. The external coach said it. So just be aware of that this can happen. And it happened to me a few times. And these things can explain people who are very much resisting the change. And if you look at this person was not anti-agile or really resisting that change. Quite the contrary. That person basically had the right idea even before. This is a very agile thinking person. But they were just, disappointed by how this was handled. And this is a general understanding for me when it comes to resistance to change, by the way, is that the people who are resisting an agile transformation the most initially are often, not always, but unproportionately often, will become agile evangelists afterwards. They will be the biggest proponents of the change in the company. They will drive it. I've seen that so many times that for me, this is a rule. The people that resist the change the most initially are often they are often the engine of the change afterwards. And to me, this is logical. It's always surprising still, but it is kind of logical. Because a person that is not interested in improving things, that says, oh, okay, now they're trying this Agile thing. In 2 years, they might try something different. They tried something else a few years ago. I will just sit here and go with the flow, do everything they tell me, and wait till it passes. These people will not resist change. But they are also not the drivers. Like, they're not dead weight, but they're just going with the flow and not trying to rock the boat and not trying to stick their head out too much. But we need the evangelists, the drivers, the people who burn for it, who say, oh, this is a great idea and I want to push this forward, and what can I do to help? And these people are often the people resisting the change, because they resist the change because they care about the company, they care about the products and the customers, and they fear that this change might negatively affect their product quality, their customers. And so they resist it. So they have the right intention. They're just doing the wrong thing from our point of view. And once they understand that agility can actually be beneficial, then they just flip a switch and they are kind of from resisting to evangelist. I always keep that in mind with Agile transformations, especially when I meet, and there's always that first person that you meet in a corporation that violently resists the transformation. And yes, I don't jump for joy when I meet these people, but I know that it's pretty likely that these people, once they really understand what's going on, and once we understand why they resist it, maybe there's something holding them back. We assume positive intent and we look for something in their past or in their environment holding them back, like they're proposing a test system way before we did. Then we can kind of get them on our side, and they can help us push the change forward. And it's not a rule that it always works. Like I'm just a human being. And every one of us is. So it doesn't always work. I've had people who were resisting and some people who were actually nasty. And I couldn't get through to them. I couldn't understand where this resistance comes from, and I couldn't use all their power, their force for good in that company. So it doesn't always work. Sometimes you just don't have the time to kind of work with these people for so long. And sometimes they just wouldn't let you get through to them. Sometimes it's very deep. And we are not hired as psychiatrists who help people understand themselves better, but we are hired to improve the business, the company, for all the employees there and the customers. So sometimes it doesn't work, but still, when I meet these people, just thinking of clients I have right now, and there are definitely people like this, resisting and seemingly not understanding, but I kind of know, or I believe that there's just something holding these people back. And once we find that, they will become the biggest proponents of the Agile transformation. I hope that's encouraging, that experience when you deal with resistance. Okay, another cause for resistance, I basically already mentioned it, but is I mentioned experience with fake Agile in the past, but there are also experiences with other transformations, other change efforts that might not have been agility. There might have been different things. There are things coming along all the time. Like nowadays, it's AI. We make everything AI because it solves every problem somehow. It's important. to think about AI and to use it. And I'm a big fan. Heck, I was studying machine learning in university, and when it wasn't hip back in the days. So I love it, but it's not just that you can slap AI onto everything and it will make things better. And that happened in the past. We had in Germany, there was the Industry 4.0 thing, which then I can remember back when I was in Silicon Valley, there was the RFID thing. Everything was RFID. Yeah. So there were things, or back then there was also IP. Everything was over IP, like telephone over IP, internet, TV over IP. They tried to do everything, banks are now in that, or have been going through the blockchain, distributed ledgers. We can do everything with distributed ledgers. If it makes sense or not, don't care. So these things happen, and people have experienced these changes, and many of them were superficial. Like, they were not really moving the needle. They were just trying to do something, it didn't work, and somehow oftentimes it's not officially canceled. It just withers, fades out over time. So if they had experience with these changes, and many of them have had this, then they will just assume that the agile transformation is a similar thing. It will go away. It will just be superficial. It's just a few fancy agile coaches talking about values, abstract values and stuff, but it will not change anything. So, of course, that's not true if you do right, but we have to acknowledge that people experience it that way because they learned it in the past, that these changes are superficial and will not really change anything. There's a model that I've only recently learned, the ADKAR model, that kind of has many phases that you go through, where you first need to understand why you want to do this and what the change is about before you actually try to learn it and learn the habits to do it. Haven't had any practical experience with that, but it sounds reasonable that kind of if you jump to the we just do it part too early, it can backfire. People have to understand how it can move the needle, and that it's not just having different roles and having different names for meetings and writing user stories now. Writing user stories is a whole different topic. This is kind of like writing user stories is not an oxymoron, but it's as kind of the wrong thing because user stories are not about writing. So I cannot count the times that I've been asked to hold a workshop in how to write good user stories or how to write better user stories. How many times? I need to search my email archive to see how many times I've been asked that. And of course, that's a wrong question. User stories are not about writing. It's a different way of collaborating. But many companies think that if they just rewrite all their requirements as in the user story format, then somehow some magic thing will happen that will make them more innovative and agile. I don't know how. I can imagine how, but they think that. And then they complain that it's so hard to put a traditional requirement like, set up the database into a user story format. And of course, the feature of the user story format is that it's supposed to be hard because it's stupid. It's not working like that. Setting up a database is not a user story. And trying to force it into the format is supposed to be difficult. It's supposed to show you, think again, this might not be the right way. But yeah, hey. Companies usually need help with understanding that it's not just the different format, calling it a user story and having a backlog that makes the change, but it's a different thinking. Okay. And with that, I'm basically through with all the the things I wanted to talk about when it comes to resistance. There's a lot more we could talk about. And again, if you have questions, just put them in the chat or comments, I guess. And I will happily answer them. And again, please excuse the delay. There's a 30 to 60 second delay from when I'm talking until I can see the question. But in general, it's the way to go when we meet the resistance is to have empathy, to assume positive intent, API. Assume positive intent in the people who are resisting the change. They are not resisting to hurt you or to make your life harder or because they are stupid. They are resisting because they essentially have the same goal as you. They want to make the business better or keep it great. They want to improve the way they are working. This is their intention. And we just have to help them understand how agility can help, and we have to understand where their past habits come from, why they react in certain ways. So that was it. And now, again, for the comments, let me switch to the page. Maybe I can see more there. And again, if you want to dive deeper, here the shameless plug to my free newsletter, the Agile Compass. I'm writing about these Agile topics, the more in-depth Agile topics for Agile practitioners regularly. And you can just sign up for free for the Agile Compass. And this week there will be an article about what we talked about today, resistance. And last week, I believe the topic last week was about psychological safety, why it is important for agility and how you can establish it, which is also a very interesting topic. So with that, maybe we'll just close this live session early, I'd say. And yeah, thank you all. And if you have questions, just with the newsletter, you can just reply to any issue of the newsletter. I read everything, and I try to get in touch and help where I can. So if you have specific questions from your contacts, from your team or something, don't be afraid to ask. Always interested in learning about situations and helping with my expertise wherever I can. So thanks for watching, for listening, and I look forward to doing these live sessions more often. I enjoy them. I hope that next time I can get even more questions and comments during the session. And then let's close it for today. Have a great day. Thanks again for watching, and see you next time. Goodbye.